United States, particularly with pertaining to the news. We're also going to connect this to the fact that if there are certain things the news media cannot talk about, for example, the downing of the Iranian airliner that the United States refused to apologize for that killed 290 Iranian citizens, that most people in the United States have no idea about. Most of you don't have any idea about how the United States behaved in Central America, or the fact that it tried to overthrow the government in Brazil twice. We put some of the, at least I wouldn't say we, I don't want to be part of this group, the U.S. military put the scumbags from Haiti in power. Duvalier, all these idiots. Supported Cedras. Then supported Jean-Bertrand Aristide and then pushed him out of power. We set up the Shah in Iran, which is a corrupt colonial government that was used by oil companies to exploit their resources. Are you starting to see why that maybe there's reasons why people don't like the U.S. military? And why this stuff stays out of the news? Right now, if you look on Gallup poll data, the confidence in institutions, guess which institution is the top of the list at most trusted? Take a guess.
The military?
Yep. I think maybe if people knew exactly what the military does sometimes, at least the higher echelon, I am blaming the privates for this. They're following orders. This is the generals, this is the people at the Department of Defense, this is the people at the Department of State, this is the CIA, and this is the FBI doing this stuff. So we'll talk about what it means when the news media cannot talk about these things or feels that there are ramifications for not talking about these things. What things can they talk about? And I'm going to show you some stories from Fox 5 News that show you some of the sensational stuff that gets on the air instead of things that are more serious conversations. Not only do things about foreign policy that embarrass the United States government not get on there. Obviously, we talked a little bit about elements of negative stories about corporations. And we also have this element that the news media does not like to talk about things that embarrass it itself as well. And we have these elements of collusion. We have the iPod City stories and things like that. And we will take a look at some of the things that is appropriate fare. They don't even really talk about issues. We talked about the fact that the news media likes to talk about murder and crime, and yet they very rarely do they ever put this into some kind of a context. Where they're saying, well, the murder rate in Suffolk County is this, but this is a horrendous act, and even though it's rare that it happens, we feel that it's necessary to tell you the story. I would say never, but they rarely couch it and contextualize it that way. Not only that, but they don't even talk about things like the national debt, for the most part, which I have been trying to get people's attention since I was 12 years old about this. When it was stood at about $3.5, $4 trillion, it now stands at $15 trillion. And not a single politician is willing to come, I'm Democrat, Republican. This is why I know that some of you are probably the vote Democratic or Republican, or you're registered that way, and I respect your choice to do that, but I would ask you to analyze these parties. Because some people, critics would say, there's one party in the United States, the incumbent party. And the only thing politicians care about is getting reelected. Name a politician that said, you know what, I am not going to run for re-election because I want to pass tough legislation. And I know it's not going to be popular, but it's the right thing to do. Name a politician that's done that. You can't. Cuomo will stay in office for as long as he can. Mayor Bloomberg altered the term limits laws in New York to stay in office. The press didn't even really get on him about that. He violated the city's charter because he thinks he's special. He thinks he's the best mayor in the world and nobody else should have the job. There's a reason why we have term limits, especially in the presidency. Most Americans don't believe in monarchies. I certainly don't. Monarchies are broken systems. They put unqualified, incompetent people in office. King George was an idiot. Louis XIV was even worse. He's the one whose wife said to the peasants who were starving to death, let them eat cake, and then they chopped their head off. Be careful what you say. Anyway, so let's go back to the filters and we'll talk about the news itself. Man, I need to get some real chalk in here. Okay, so we stopped with the second filter, the role of ads. And one of the issues here that Chomsky and Hermann talk about in their book, that is backed up by Ben Bagdickian in his book as well, is the role of advertisement. I want to say Facebook said today that they get $3.2 billion off of advertisement alone. They also like to sell your information to those advertisers as well. You'll notice that if you have bought something from Amazon or a company like that, on your specific Facebook page, the ad will be matched to you, what your content is. That's the same with YouTube. They put up things, if you watched a particular video and there's a product or a website connected to that, they'll put that ad up. So they're collecting your private information as you're online. They're collecting your search information, they're collecting your IP address, they know what region of the country you're in, they know what internet provider you use. They also probably have some things that read whatever comments you put up on your wall and watch, you can see the pictures and videos and things. And all of that is technically Facebook property. Okay, so Facebook is going to do very little to harm its people that advertise with it, regardless of what its relationship is or how good these companies are. A lot of people are excited about this IPO. It would be interesting to see. What I find interesting is that you're talking about a company that's supposedly worth $100 billion that employs 3,200 people. And you hear politicians say, this is the new wave of the economy. I don't think that 3,200 people is enough to replace 500,000 manufacturing jobs that have been lost. And Facebook is not a company. Does Facebook manufacture anything? You know, do they export anything? Do they generate foreign revenue? They don't barely, I mean, they do basically nothing. You could wipe their website out and everything that ever existed would be gone. You can't do that to Honda or Mercedes or something, or a real company like BASF or 3M or even IBM or Hewlett-Packard. Okay? So as these companies evolve, these relationships still exist, but they alter somewhat. Number 3, this has to do specifically with news gathering. Instead of really doing real reporting, this is actually more of a debate or a criticism of how newspapers operate and how they gather information from stories. That instead of going out and doing an investigation on a particular official or a department where maybe there's corruption, instead of going out and pounding the pavement, asking questions of people, instead of going to Walmart employees and asking them what conditions are like, they just call up the CEO of Walmart or somebody on the board or some executive and go, how are your employees? Are they satisfied? You guys doing a good job? You're treating them right. Or something happens at the State Department and they'll call the Assistant Secretary of State to get a comment. Or they'll call the police. Or they'll call the government. And why is that a problem? Hermann and Chomsky say that is a problem because the officials are running the information and are deciding what information is released, how it's released. This was particularly the case that Bagdickian talks about with the information that was released about Iraq and their connection to 9/11. At one point, the press and the Bush administration were reporting that Mohammed Atta had met with Iraqi officials in the Czech Republic. It turned out to be false. They also said that Iraq was trying to acquire yellow cake uranium from Nigeria, which is also false. That they had weapons of mass destruction. That was also false. And nobody did any real reporting and just took the administration's word for it. And you can tell that there's a problem with that. What's the problem with taking a politician's word? Martin?
Politicians lie.
Yeah, I mean, they manipulate things. It's their job. And they view the news media as the enemy. Almost all politicians. I'd be curious if Cuomo's going to allow reporters up there. And if he does, he's only going to allow certain types of questions. And I will be shocked. I could be wrong about this, and I want to talk to somebody who went there. I don't think they're going to even allow students to ask controversial questions. Like, why did you cut the education budget for the city of New York when their schools are falling apart? what the hell is that? Well, he cut like 1,500 teachers, and he's going to cut more. Knock down the state university budget to where now I can't get travel funds for any of my professional activities. It's absurd. Okay? Why not raising taxes, Mark?
Didn't he cut some teachers because they said they were teaching at a really low level?
Here's the thing. When you have no facilities and when they dump children in your school who have failed at other schools, what chance do you have? And I would say that the standards are messed up anyway. Who said standardized testing is the way to tell if any students are learning? I mean, that's part of the problem there. There are a whole host of problems. It's not, but it doesn't help when you have the governor thinking that the way to cut the budget. Now, in defense of the governor, I want to be fair here, there is an enormous budget deficit in New York. You have to get rid of it. But he did not even attempt to raise taxes on the 44 billionaires that live in the city of New York. Did he? The mayor could write a check right now and close the budget deficit and still have $7 billion left over. And he considers himself to be charitable. We could just tax Mayor Bloomberg and close the entire budget. We could run the state on Mayor Bloomberg's own personal wealth for 5 years, probably. And yet, Mayor Bloomberg probably pays 15% in taxes, just like Mitt Romney, because they use loopholes. Okay? And not only that, Mayor Bloomberg controls a media empire. There are serious issues with what's going on in the state. And one of the issues is reporters are not talking about it. They're not asking tough questions. They go to Mayor Bloomberg and they're asking little softball questions. Or they go to Cuomo and they just say, well, you cut schools. Is there any way that in the future these jobs will come back? Instead of saying, Mayor or Governor Cuomo, you ran on education as one of your platforms, and yet when you came in, you handicapped the educational institutions by cutting their funding. And if any of you have gone to some of these schools in New York City, or know people who've gone to some of these failing schools in New York City or some of these areas, you know what this is like. I mean, there are third world countries that have better schools than this. I mean, there's asbestos in a lot of these schools, rats and roaches crawling around, there's no doors on the bathrooms, they have books from 1987. Some of them don't even have books. There are virtually no computers in these schools. There's violence everywhere. The buildings are falling apart. And yet politicians, and not just Cuomo, all politicians say they're the education president. And again, or governor, or whatever it is. And again, the reason why none of these issues get dealt with on a more serious level is that journalists don't ask questions. They don't challenge politicians. They don't jump up in their face. They don't ask them tough questions. And part of it is because they just go to them. And one of the reasons why is, here it is. This has to do with access. You are, let's get away from the governor. You are a White House reporter. Because believe it or not, as much as what I just said about him, I still think that he's better than some other alternatives, particularly David Patterson and a couple other people. Elliot Spitzer, he keeps his pants on. But anyway, if you are in a White House press corps and you start asking Barack Obama a bunch of pointed questions to try and embarrass him, or just to try to reveal things that his administration is being corrupt, and you continue to do this, regardless of the fact that the president keeps dodging the question, or that he doesn't want to answer the question, you know what's going to happen to your access? What do you think they're going to do? You think they're going to renew your White House press pass? You think the president's going to ever sit down with you in a one-on-one interview? Why is that important for a reporter, for their career, to have access to politicians?
So they can keep getting stories and keep making money?
Right. I mean, their job is on the line too. You always have to keep in mind what Hermann and Chomsky are talking about, is that money is the incentive that drives why news coverage takes the tenor that it does. And even though viewership is important, there's no doubt about it, and that's what leads to some of the sensational crap, what is just as important is getting access to high-level figures. Anyway. And if you don't have that access, somebody else will get it, and you'll lose your job. And what do you think? Do you think White House correspondents get paid well? Or that they're living in a cardboard box on food stamps? I mean, even reporters at the Daily News get paid somewhat well. You've got to think, a White House correspondent's making what? What do you think their salary is a year? $300,000? $500,000? You think that, and people say, oh, that wouldn't make somebody bend their morals. Yes, it would. There are people that stab you in the face for $1,000. What do you think they'd do for $500,000? That's why I keep telling people about how dangerous the national debt is. There are people who shoot you for your shoes in the streets. What do you think people are going to do if they have to pay back $15 trillion? Think they'll be happy about that? That might turn normal people into revolutionaries. I hope it doesn't get to that point. We do have a chance here to pay this thing down. But again, when you have reporters that want to focus on it, and here's the other thing. When reporters don't focus on a story, guess what politicians do?
Don't pay attention.
Yeah, why would a politician care about the national debt if the news isn't talking about it? Even if it's a serious problem. Like, remember last year, remember the debt ceiling debate? Remember the debt ceiling debate? And it came up to the wire, and the stock market started going haywire and dropped 800 points, and they passed this temporary resolution to get to 2012 so that he all save face and run for re-election and and Romney and all these people wanted to run for president. You didn't really. They said, well, we'll fix it down the road in 2 months. Did anything happen? And did the press really report on that? Terrible. What's even worse, if you go back, and I'm going to show you some pieces from Jon Stewart, who seems to be the only honest person in journalism, even though he's a comedian, him showing that CNBC was cheerleading and telling people to buy stocks while they knew what was going on behind the scenes. That these banks and these other financial institutions were engaged in outright fraud, and that the market was a bubble, and that it was going to bust. But why were they telling average investors, everyday investors, to continue to invest in the market? Why do you think CNBC was doing such a thing? Who do you think advertises for CNBC, with CNBC? They're a financial news company. Who do you think advertises with CNBC?
News Corp or
Maybe not really. They actually compete with them.
The banks.
Yeah. Are you going to run a story that says Bank of America's profits are inflated and that they're headed for a disaster if they're advertising with you? You know what kind of a phone call you're going to get? What the hell is wrong with you? Bob, I thought we were friends. Don't our kids go to the same school? We go to the same country club? I see you at the caviar store. Why do you do that to me? I'm going to get fired over this. And it's not true. And then, so the guy goes, oh, well, if you say it's not true, the CEO wouldn't lie, right? CEOs wouldn't lie. Nah. Right? Nobody lies. Everybody tells the truth. Anyway. So again, you see these interconnectedness going on here. That's a serious, serious problem. And again, the use of official sources is more of the element of misinformation. That if all you do, look, any reporter, any real reporter will tell you, and most of them will tell you, look, we're told not to investigate these stories to a certain level. Like the initial investigations into Watergate, they gave it to 2 junior reporters who had no experience whatsoever because Ben Bradley, who was the editor of the paper at the time, did not want to draw the ire of the White House. The Washington Post has been accused in the past of being a liberal newspaper. Richard Nixon was a Republican, and he didn't like the press anyway. And they felt that, and Richard Nixon's been a lunatic. He had an enemies list. I mean, he used the FBI to investigate people. He investigated people's taxes. He tried to pull the licensing licenses from newspapers and television stations that wrote bad stories. There was one point where a reporter who wrote something bad about him in 1960 was not allowed to go on the trip to China with him in 1972. He held a grudge for 12 years. And I have no doubt that if Richard Nixon could have thought he kind of got away with it, he would have put people who didn't like him in jail. And Ben Bradley was afraid of that. And that's a very real reality. Dead men tell no tales. Go ask the FBI. I mean, I know this sounds like kind of weird and some kind of spy novel, but I'm telling you right now, people get threatened with both loss of their job and physical harm if they continue to do these types of things. Okay? And they killed Jimmy Hoffa. Nobody's even looking for him anymore. Supposedly he's buried somewhere. So I guess some joke was he was buried in Old Giant Stadium or something, or Yankee Stadium. Anyway, the fourth filter, and this one is an important one. I sort of hit at this already. So when a newspaper or a reporter or a news magazine or a TV show engages in behavior that either embarrasses their advertisers or the other businesses they're in collusion with, or their own bosses, or a politician that the newspapers have a good relationship, or with other powerful, wealthy people, there are serious ramifications for this. You can get taken off of assignments, you can get fired. There was one point in Enron's history where there was a Fortune reporter, and he also had his own newsletter. His name was Jim Chanos, and he had a sell rating on Enron, and Enron had bought off these rating agencies and these analysts to make a buy rating because, and if you guys know the history of Enron, all their profits were inflated and didn't exist, and they were actually running at a deficit. They were losing money while reporting earnings. So it was complete fraud. And the news agencies, as well as these financial analysts, were in on this in the sense that they had a buy rating not because they thought Enron was a good company, but because Enron was giving them money. And Jim Chanos said, this is a bad company. I'm not going to tell my investors to buy a stock that's probably going to drop to zero at some point. And so he had a sell rating, and he worked for, again, one of these companies that put out a newsletter that gave recommendations to investors, and Enron told the company, you better fire this guy or you're not getting any more of our money. So they fired him. And then about a year or so later, it came out to light that Enron was one of the biggest corporate corruption scandals in the history of the United States. And if they would have listened to Jim Chanos or allowed him to do more investigation, and they did this stuff too. When they had a question about the earnings for the company, they'd call the CEO and go, hey, what's going on with these earnings? They're right? Can you tell us how you got them? What's the outlook for the company next month? Instead of going and investigating the company. This would be like OSHA, just taking a factory's word for it. OSHA is the Occupational Health and Safety Administration. This would be like, instead of them or the FDA, another organization, instead of them going inspecting factories or farms or where your milk and other food comes from, they just call them up on the phone. Is everything cool? You guys aren't like contaminating food, are you? All right, just want to make sure. All right, talk to you next month. I mean, are you kidding me? You know what kind of scandal that would cause? It's probably what led to the poison peanut butter. Remember the poison peanut butter? You guys don't remember that. This is, again, an example of how the news glances over stuff. There was a company that had a batch of poison peanut butter, poisoned with salmonella, and it was a bunch of peanut butter. This ended up people dying. And this idiot didn't even go to jail for, I think they tried to try him for murder. I'll look up the case. They knew, they had tested it themselves and they knew it was contaminated. They knew it was contaminated. This is what the problem is. Then they tried to ship it to Canada, and the Canadians tested it. And they said, this is contaminated peanut butter. You better get this the hell out of here before we arrest you. And so they took it back, and instead of disposing of it, now you have 2 positive tests for salmonella, they sold it to mental institutions and schools and all kinds of stuff. And like at least a couple people died, and it might have been as high as 5 or 6. And a lot of people were hurt. Even the president made a statement about this. He said, what kind of world are we living in when you can't eat peanut butter? I don't want to live in a world where lettuce kills you. I mean, isn't there enough out there to kill you? Now I got to worry about E. coli every 5 minutes? But you try to put confidence that these institutions are doing what's right, and if they aren't doing what's right, what should be the news media's role? What should be an investigative journalist's role? Some other people haven't talked. What do you think?
Proving why they're not right?
Or at least at the very minimum, in a free speech society, the news media... Go ahead.
Yeah, calling him out on it, basically?
Yeah, it should warn people, right? We call it watchdog function. That what this harms is the watchdog function of the media. That the media is supposed to be, and in France they call it the fourth estate, that it should be its own entity, that it shouldn't be influenced by economic institutions or political institutions, at least not to that extent, to where they're not doing their job. Like when there's poison peanut butter, the public should know this. Whether through the FDA, who many times does not do their job and they're overwhelmed, or through the news media. And when something happens, when Taco Bell is selling E. coli tainted food, the public should know about that immediately. Not tomorrow, not next week, not after 15 people die. And I think I'm not going to ask this question, but I don't know if anybody's ever had somebody die of food poisoning, but I'm telling you right now. It's one thing, I watched my mom die of lupus, so I know what it's like to watch someone die. And we knew she was going this way, so we could prepare ourselves emotionally. Do you really want to think that your dad woke up one day and he was healthy and he went to work, ate lunch, and died? Because some dumbass wasn't doing their job at a factory? I mean, the absolute horrible tragedy, the preventable tragedy that is. And that's the news media. Their lack of attention to certain issues causes people to die. There's no doubt about it. And I don't want to hear them try and defend themselves. Because there is no defense to allowing tainted food to spread through a society without telling people. And then on the other hand, what I love about the media as well, is that when they get called out for something like that, then for the next few months, everything is a panic. Everything's like, watch out. Everything is swine flu, tropical storm Irene, run for the hills, go buy a bottle of water, be rude to people at the store. Make sure you buy every single battery and flashlight so nobody can have them. One thing I didn't see, people on the side of the road trying to sell flashlights for like $50 a piece. That's some scummy stuff, isn't it? Anyway, people in Florida during hurricanes, like people sell lumber for your windows, they'll do that kind of crap. They'll jack the price. They're not allowed. That's technically illegal. They'll do it with gasoline too. People try to get out of Dodge because staying in Florida during a hurricane is probably stupid. You know, that's why the Seminoles didn't build any major cities. It's like, bye, we're leaving in the fall. So, anyway, but back to this element of flack, that reporters face a lot of serious issues, not only from the people they're reporting about, but from other reporters, from their bosses. And here's the thing, when you get blacklisted or blackballed by the news media, are you going to be able to ever get another job? Here though is something interesting. I'm going to talk about the fifth filter, and then we're going to talk about this element here. I'll put it here. We're going to talk about this. What does the internet open this process up a little bit more? Does it negate the filters? Does it make it easier for individuals or social groups, you know, like there are environmental groups that will report things about what companies are doing that are outside the news, that non-news agencies, and news agencies, independent news agencies on the internet, are they becoming more important in taking over the role of the media, or at least the corporate-dominated media, which again has enormous blind spots in it. And within these blind spots, serious problems take place. Economic issues rise up and almost destroy the economy. We have issues where we got into a war with Iraq because people really thought, because the news media told them, that Iraqi officials were involved in 9/11 and that he had nuclear weapons. And if you just look at it logically, I know the U.S. military gets accused of being kind of stupid, and the idea of military intelligence is a joke, but let me tell you something, it's a rational body, and let me ask you something. If they truly thought, and were 100% sure, remember George Tenet said it was a slam dunk, Mr. President, it's a slam dunk. Iraqis have weapons of mass destruction. Do you really think if the Iraqis had anthrax bombs and chemical weapons and nuclear weapons that we would have sent 200,000 soldiers into that onslaught? Willy-nilly? Do you really think that we would risk? How many soldiers do you think a nuclear weapon could kill all at once? If you have 200,000 soldiers? Yes. What a debacle that would have been. Almost 250,000 people would have been killed in about 5 seconds. We would have lost the Iraq War. We would have been embarrassed internationally. We would have threatened our entire position in the world. We would have caused chaos in economic markets. You're telling me that the U.S. Department of Defense really thought that Iraq had nuclear weapons. But that's what the press told you. Because it's frightening. They wanted to scare people. Remember after in late 2002, early 2003, some of you were probably pretty young at the time, they were saying stuff like this: we don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud. That's what Condoleezza Rice said. That's what Dick Cheney said too. It's better to act now than wait for Saddam Hussein to give Al-Qaeda a nuclear weapon and then they'll blow up Paris or New York. Do you want that? And the American people said, no. Kill him. Make him pay. Bush said, yeah. See, Saddam, that's what you get for trying to kill my dad. He even said that out in public. He said that out in public. He said, by the way, he also tried to kill my dad. Was that the real reason? Was it oil? We don't know. It certainly wasn't because the Defense Department truly thought that Saddam Hussein had nuclear weapons. I'm telling you right now. Americans don't like to see soldiers die. Do you think they want to see them evaporated in 2 seconds?
So if we live in this broken system where our watchdog function of the media...
Or at least that's what Hermann and Chomsky said.
Yeah,
there's other views.
It doesn't really work anymore. How are we supposed to like get past it? And
Well, again, after I get done with the fifth filter, we'll talk about that. That there's a pluralist theory that says, hey, there's no way. Okay, maybe these big companies like Fox, they control local news and they control broad news programs, but the internet is so open. And if what you're saying is, if you know this personally, you're probably not going to trust these news sites, right? So you might go on the internet and look for alternative information.
yeah.
This may lead to these alternative information sites growing and challenging these corporate-dominated entities. But we'll talk as well as these entities can buy these other ones up. Like YouTube. YouTube used to be an open site that was not-for-profit, basically. They never showed commercials. A couple of them, I think Twitter started out that way too. There's been a lot of sites that were on there that were essentially non-corporate, and then they eventually got bought out. And then things like Hulu came along. So there is attempts by these large media companies to dominate the internet. And if you look at search results, most people go to these major sites, Fox News or CNN or MSNBC or CNBC, to get their news. And they still have not come to the conclusion, even after the financial crisis, which if you ask the average American, did you see the housing bubble coming? They'll say no. But there were experts up and down the line who were trying to warn people. Peter Schiff, who ran for Senate in Connecticut last year, and I believe he lost, he was warning people in 2004 that the housing bubble was going to destroy the U.S. economy. People laughed at him. You're like, you're stupid, dude. The market just went up 900 points today. The hell are you talking about? And they shouted him down. They said, shut up. You're an idiot. And what they really were saying is, hey, don't talk bad about the economy when there's a boom going on, even if it's a bubble. And the internet companies were actually part of that early bubble. So anyway, the last one is this is Chomsky and Herman's view. This isn't my view. Although I can see where they get this. Okay, you have this idea here that the news media has almost a built-in sort of religious bias. That's what they call it, Hermann and Chomsky. They actually originally, when they made the filters, that anti-communism was the fifth filter. You can see that communism is gone. You can actually put anti-terrorism on here as one of their things. As well as, again, pro-capitalism, American-style capitalism, and pro-military. That the news media, not only the news media, but as much as Hollywood gets accused of being liberal, is there any movies where they make the military look really bad and ridiculous, other than like a comedy, like Sergeant Bill Coe or something like that? Does Hollywood, and I'm asking you from your own experience, I don't really, I'm not giving my opinion here, does the military get attacked by the movie industry? Or is it supported? Or is it mixed? Anybody seen the previews to this movie, Act of Valor?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Did that take a pro-military stance?
It was, isn't it?
Did you
like,
see it already?
No, isn't it like coming out?
Right.
Like,
That's what I was going to say. You act like it's...
No, but it
like
looks
you.
good. I mean,
But you're going to go see this movie.
yeah, probably.
Why? Are you in the military?
No.
Do you have family in the military?
No.
But if you actually look at, I'll tell you right now, just a cursory analysis of anybody ever seen a World War II movie? How does it present the military? That they make mistakes and that they're bumbling morons and they're bureaucratic idiots? They can't run anything right. And they bombed the Chinese industry in Belgrade because they had a map from 1972. I mean, is that, and that they bombed? More people, in the first Gulf War, more people died from friendly fire than from enemy fire. That didn't come out in the media, did it? In the first Gulf War as well, 70% of the bombs that were dropped were not smart bombs. But every single time you turned on the television, they showed these laser-guided bombs. A lot of civilians died. They don't even know. How many times have you ever heard the U.S. military talk about how many Iraqis died in the second Gulf War? Somebody give me a figure. How many Iraqis died from 2003 to now in that war? Why doesn't the news media talk about this? Because it splashes blood on the military's face. If we have time, I'll show you BlackRock shooting civilians in Iraq on YouTube. There's the thing, back to what the point you were making. If I got, first of all, Abu Ghraib was discovered on the internet. It was not discovered by a news agency. Somebody posted those pictures. One of those idiots who were doing that. Okay? There's a lot of stories that break like that. You have issues like Blackwater shooting people on YouTube. Right? Remember the soldiers pissing on I think it was the Taliban soldiers, something like that. Remember also they were accused of shooting the Quran in Guantanamo Bay and waterboarding people. Right? The military hates these types of stories, and you can see why. They don't, first of all, most of the military will tell you this doesn't reflect the way the military acts in general, and that you're just trying to throw cold water on us, or worse, okay, and criticize us. But in reality, you've got to ask yourself a few questions that Hermann and Chomsky would say this. In order to understand this pro-military stance and pro-capitalism, first of all, these two things are intimately related. If we were not a military power, we would not be an economic power. Why doesn't the news media ask questions like this? Why do we have bases in 190 countries? Why are we giving money to Uzbekistan?
So it's set our influences?
But for why? Uzbekistan doesn't like us. They have no interest in being around us. They're not going to buy a bunch of iPads from us, and they're made in China anyway. It's like it's some weird. It's like a game of Stratego or something. I don't know what it is. It's oddball, risk or something, right? You roll the dice. And why is the defense budget $700 billion? We are out of all the money that's spent on the defense in the entire world, we spend 42% of it. You can combine all the other countries on Earth, all their defense budgets, and it's still not as much as we spend. We have jet fighters that can fly in outer space. We have bombers that are invisible to radar. We have night vision, some of it, infrared vision and stuff, can see through walls. We have spy satellites that are so accurate that you could be sitting on the beach out here and drinking a can of soda, they could read the label. When Bin Laden was caught, the president and his cabinet were all sitting in a room watching it live. The SEALs had cameras on their helmets. Okay? That's impressive, and it's nice to have, and it's good when you go up against a technological foe, but we're fighting people in caves. And it still doesn't explain why we went to Iraq, and did we have enough armor on the Humvees?
No.
Did people have enough body armor?
No. But body armor is
Probably running out of bullets, too.
You get shot in the face.
That's true, that's true. But wouldn't you rather have body armor? You know, I mean, you don't always get it. I hope that Iraq doesn't have a lot of sharpshooters, but if they do, you're dead anyway. But I prefer to have, go ask a cop, would you rather have, you know, just a helmet or a bulletproof vest and a helmet or something like that? But you're right, you can still get hurt. But the fact is that what's so funny is that it appears in the next 20 or 30 years, our enemy is going to be these people like Osama bin Laden who hide in caves. And we have to hunt down with intelligence, like the CIA, we have to hunt these people down. And big jets that fly in outer space are not going to be any good. I mean, that's for fighting the Soviet Union. That's for fighting China. And I hope to God we never get into a war with China. That'd be the end of this world. I'm telling you right now. Because China and the United States would turn this nuclear real quick. Real quick. Because China would get paranoid and the United States would get crazy. And then India would start to get involved. Because they don't like China, and they got nuclear weapons, and Pakistan would probably, it would turn into a world war real quick. I don't think either country wants that. Hopefully it's not going to happen, but you know what, after World War I, people thought that was the last war ever too. That's what they thought. And like 16 short years later or so, or about less than 20, well, about 21 years later, it was an even worse war that killed 65 million people. So anyway, let's hope we don't go that direction. But let's get back to this idea here. So everybody got this written down?
Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes I don't like to use slideshows all the time. And it's fun to work on the board, I think, sometimes. But here's this idea here. The other side of this is this pluralistic theory of the media. And this is based on the idea that, first, the internet grants a lot of, it's basically free access to post content, whereas in the past, we talked about this before, remember in the past, in order to start a newspaper, you needed what?
Printing press.
Right, which is expensive as hell, and it's expensive to run, and you need delivery trucks, and you need advertisers, and you need reporters. It is a pain. Nowadays, what do you need to put a story on the internet?
Computer.
Huh? That's it. You can even borrow a computer, right? You can come here and put something online, or to put something on YouTube, all you need is a little camera, right? And you can do all kinds of things. And people do a lot of heavy production value on YouTube. I've seen some really good videos that were, alternative news programs and things like that. There are also things like, look, hey, Al Jazeera talks about this stuff. What's the attitude of most Americans towards Al Jazeera? Do they find that to be a reputable news agency? Or the arm of Al-Qaeda? What's the reputation? Because Al Jazeera has been portrayed in the American press in what way? Al Jazeera is the Arab, it's in English, but it's basically the Arabic news station. It goes to all Arab countries in the Middle East and also other countries too, like Iran, which people in Iran are not Arabs, they're Persians. It's like Afghans or Pashtun. They're not Arabs, but they're Muslims. Anybody? So what's the attitude you think that Americans have towards Al Jazeera?
Negative?
Right. If they even know about it, right? Do most Americans watch the BBC? The BBC offers an alternative view of American policy and American behavior and also European behavior. The British press is much more critical of its government than ours is. Way more. They annihilate people in the press. And I'll tell you what, here's my little editorial for today. Do you know how campaigns are funded in Great Britain? And how long in this country, how long do presidential campaigns take place? How long of a period of time do they start and end?
Kind of like almost immediately after the election.
Yeah, it almost never stops. That's why, Cuomo's here trying to raise money, and Obama's he was raising money probably the day after he was elected. Not even before he was in office. And how much money, does anybody know how much money Obama and McCain raised? Like, each? To run for office? Obama raised $1 billion. Billion. McCain raised $700 million. The salary of the presidency, $500,000 a year. But it's a nice residence and a good house. You don't have to pay for food. Everybody pretends to like you to your face. I always hear people go, "Oh, the president's here, I tell him right on." They'd be like, "Oh, Mr. President, it's so nice to meet you." Like, I'll tell you, there's people that go, "I'm going to give the governor some crap." Like, "Wow, Mr. Cuomo, it's such an honor. Would you be the godfather of my child?" Anyway. And start a scholarship fund for him. Anyway. But again, in Great Britain, when they call an election, you get 60 days to campaign, and it's all publicly funded. Why do you think that we don't publicly fund campaigns in the United States? It actually has to do with something that's related to this. The Supreme Court has actually ruled that the Supreme Court has actually ruled that if you're Ross Perot and you've got $1 billion and you can spend as much money as you want, they can't stop you. The Supreme Court ruled that you can't limit campaign contributions, nor can you make illegal private campaign contributions. And they essentially held up the entire system to the point of expanding it to where now corporations can give presidential candidates $500,000. And each one of their employees can give a candidate, depending on what office they're running for, $5,000 to $10,000 apiece. And many times, you know what these companies do? They'll give the maximum amount, not only to one candidate, but to both candidates. McCain and Obama had the same backers. And then they give their employees bonuses and go, hey, take this money, you can give it to Mitt Romney and Barack Obama. Why would you give to both candidates? And is that a problem? Yes?
I mean, if either one wanted basically benefiting the company.
Right. I mean, you got your hands in both pockets, so no matter what, what's wrong with that? Why does that look so? Does that look bad, or is bad?
Well, it's kind of like gambling on the government.
To some extent, I mean, I'll tell you right now, you can't go to a casino and go, yeah, I'd like to put $100 on the Giants and $100 on the Patriots. You'd be like, get the hell out of here. Seriously, you cannot do this kind of stuff. This looks fishy. Like you're trying to game the system or something like that. First of all, you ain't going to win any money like that, and unlike the political system where you're going to get favor no matter what. And this is the thing. You remember when Obama ran for office, he was upset with oil companies, wasn't he? He said, we're going to get off this foreign oil, we're going to make BP pay, all this other stuff. He took money from ExxonMobil. Why didn't he give it back? Nobody pointed a gun at his face and said, you better take this money. Why didn't he give it back? You remember what was one of his mottos besides yes you can? What did he say he was going to bring to the White House?
Change.
Yeah. Is it change? Not only did he not really change anything yet, maybe the health care bill, he actually kept the same Secretary of Defense that the Bush administration had. He kept a Republican as his Secretary of Defense. Nobody thinks that's odd? I have a pretty good impression that behind closed doors, these people are all friends with each other. That this might be a big show. What do we know Mitt Romney and Newt Gingrich don't like at the end of the night? Go, man, we really played them today, didn't we, huh? And the man, I loved it when you called said that stuff about me before. It was hilarious. Right? South Park actually made an episode about this, that Barack Obama and McCain were both jewel thieves, and they were in league together to distract the country so they could steal the Hope Diamond. And then at the end, Obama says, I want to try this presidency thing out. So he stays in the White House. So anyway, I'm not saying that they're exactly the same people, and I'm not trying to say that Obama is corrupt, but what I'm saying, and I'm not saying he didn't want to change things, what I'm saying is when you get to the White House, all of a sudden, the campaign things you said run into reality in the office of the presidency, and I think you come to the conclusion that the president doesn't run the government, the bureaucracy runs the government. These are people who have been there for 20 or 30 years. You can't fire these people. They have tremendous power. If they don't want your programs to go through, they're not going to go through. And I think when he got there, he's like, damn. And on top of that, when you get to the presidency, every 5 minutes the phone is ringing. Every 5 minutes it's a crisis. Albania's got the bomb. It's like, what? Sir, we got information and blah, blah, blah. It's like, man, you don't get any sleep. It's a tough job. There's no doubt about it. So, and when Obama took office, the economy was horrendous, remember? So as much as I'm criticizing him for having these slogans, I do want to be fair and say that the president has at least attempted to try and change things, but he's certainly not changed the tone in Washington. It's gotten nastier since he got there. And I hate to say it, but I'm telling you right now, there are people who just don't like Obama for various reasons, and you can guess what I'm trying to point at here. And it's not just his personality. Okay. A lot of people, when he was elected, thought, oh, that's the end of this country. Serious, people bought people bought guns like crazy. I'm telling you, after he was elected, seriously, and there's still people in this country that think he's a Muslim.
So if even a president that obviously wanted to try and change things, or said that he wanted to change things, so we'd probably have to try and follow up on this. Once he got to the White House, he couldn't do anything. I mean, like...
Or at least he thought it was very hard.
Yeah, or it's very hard to change anything, and he only has, 4 to 8 years to...
And you really only get 6 because your last 2 years no one pays any attention to you because everybody else is running for office.
Yeah.
You're lamed up at that point.
So, I mean, like, how do we... I mean, like, there's other officials we can vote for, but, like, that barely does anything.
I mean, do you want my opinion on how you fix this system?
Yeah.
I think you take at least part of the British model. You get all this damn money out of politics.
Oh.
You outlaw private funds. You stop it. You give each candidate, first of all, you stop this constant crappy campaigning and you shorten up the primary season. You have three, this is what you do. You have 15 states go this day, 20 states this day, the rest of them that day. And then that way you don't have this from state to state nonsense going on and dragging on, because by the time we get to November, people are going to be sick of all three of these people. Romney, Gingrich, and Obama. I mean, doesn't this stuff, it's like, enough already, right? And then when people stop paying attention, important things happen and then nobody's paying attention. And I'm telling you, but the Supreme Court stands in the way of this. They've said outright, you cannot outlaw private funds in campaign. And I'm sitting, and for me, as an average American, and maybe you guys feel this way too, I'm looking at the Supreme Court going, first of all, what the hell are you doing getting involved in this? And two, what are you trying to say? That wealthy people have more of a voice than poor people? That if you're poor, just forget about running for office forever? Because hiring wealthy lawyers to be the president hasn't worked out very well. Bush was a wealthy man. Did he do a good job? He left with 17% approval rating. That was lower than Nixon, who was resigned from office. I mean, seriously. What's so funny is that Clinton left with one of the highest approval ratings. First of all, he had a $2.6 trillion surplus, and the economy was doing great, but he was impeached, and he still left with a higher approval rating than Bush. Right now, the president's approval rating is about 37%. And what it reflects is the cynicism that the American public has, because they know that every time they turn around, ExxonMobil will stick in their hands in their pocket. And again, let's use Speaker Boehner, because he's a Republican, because I don't want to seem like I'm picking on one politician. Speaker Boehner's not, and he's from my home state of Ohio. He is not taking my phone call. Even if I gave him $1,000, he's not taking my phone call. He doesn't give a damn who I am, and he doesn't give a damn what I'm going through. And to prove this, did anybody hear what Mitt Romney said the other day about really poor people? He said, I don't give a damn. They got welfare.
Yeah, so they have a safety.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah, everybody loves being on welfare and food stamps. That's real honorable, isn't it? My mom was, when she first got divorced, she was on welfare and food stamps, and I remember the embarrassment that she felt going into the stores. She hated it. She finally trained herself and got a job. I remember I had to go into school. This is how goofy schools were back then. They would have specially discounted lunches. And you'd think they'd want to keep this quiet, because you know how cruel kids are. They would go, everybody else that would buy the regular lunches, and then they go, okay, everybody gets discounted lunches. Come on up in front of the class. And many times I'd be the only one who came up. So excuse me if I take a little bit of a negative view of the way money is in politics. And the fact that politicians don't give one damn about middle class people for the most part. When's the last time the president talked about raising the national minimum wage? At least President Obama was trying to deal with the healthcare issue. At least he was trying to do that. This is the only industrialized nation on the face of the earth that doesn't provide some basic care for every one of its citizens. There are 25% of the American public does not have health care, and that includes millions of children. Millions. We can't even go to the doctor if they get a cold. And in the 90s, you guys don't remember this. It was so bad in the 90s that if you didn't have health insurance and you were dying on the streets outside of the hospital, they could not and would not take you in. They just let you die in the middle of the streets. Some people would say that's not the America they grew up in. Other people would say, hey, look, to each his own. It's a rough world. You've got to deal with this stuff, right? It's part of the philosophy of American capitalism. Everybody's out there on your own. Get what you can. But watch your back. Because about 20 people with knives pull it out for you. Okay? I don't mean to depress you guys. You guys are sitting there going, man, this is scary. I would say, look, you've got one of the issues, and one of the reasons why a lot of you maybe a lot of this is somewhat new to you is, again, the news media does not do its job. I'm not saying the news media has to talk about every damn scandal because they love. And here's the funny thing is, the media loves scandals and sensational news, don't they? When it's like celebrities and stuff, when it's Charlie Sheen, they talk about it all day, or it's Anna Nicole Smith. How come they don't love scandals with government? You should ask yourself that question. You think government scandals don't sell newspapers? Remember John Edwards when he was cheating on his wife? Remember the South Carolina governor who was cheating on his wife with the Argentine woman? And he had the audacity to say that I was attracted to her because she was exotic. That's what he said. Which, some of you don't realize, that's a very racist way to describe people on some level. Very derogatory at the very minimum. Maybe not racist, but at least derogatory. I mean, what kind of statement is that? That Argentine women are exotic? What the hell is that? Are they primitive too? They're wearing loincloths and throwing sticks at people? I mean, what kind of nonsensical statement is that? You know? And not only that, he denied it. He was leaving, he was getting off of a gate where he was departing. The plane had come from Buenos Aires, and he tried to claim that he was walking down the Appalachian Trail, and he took a plane in from Atlanta. And it was like, dude, your plane came straight from Buenos Aires. And then, when his own party that was in control of the House in South Carolina called on him to resign, he refused. And they had to threaten to impeach him. I mean, that kind of crap going on. Now, that got all in the news. But stuff, why the FDA missed the salmonella in peanut butter doesn't. It's really odd. And the news loves things. Hurricanes, any kind of natural disaster, if a bridge falls down, but they never want to give you the reason for it. Any kind of weird murders, gangland warfare, drug dealers getting arrested, frat parties getting busted. This is the stuff the news media deals in, and we'll show you right here. Let's look over some of these news stories. And then we'll come back to some stories that don't get in the news. But let's look at what gets in the news. Look at this. It's either sensational or it's garbage. Supermodel wife prayers for Tom Brady. Who cares? We know you have a great life, Tom. Nobody wants to hear it, dude. Okay? Groundhogs disagree on spring arrival. Oh, no. I'm not listening to groundhog. I'll go outside. It's 60 degrees yesterday. I don't think a groundhog's going to be right about this. Besides, they disagreed, so it's all up in here. Oh, by the way, Punxsutawney Phil has a Facebook page. That's why I'm investing in the company. I don't like Facebook, but I'll invest in the company. I'll make money off your IPO, you idiots, and I'll sell the stocks the next day. Here's actually something that's more of actually a real story. This is about an organization, stuff people might be interested in. But again, it's not necessarily a hard-hitting story. But it is an informative story. So I'll give him a little bit of credit for that. Let me see if we can find some video stories. And we'll show you. There's live video. Here, look. This is Good Morning, or Good Day New York. And this woman, I don't know if that's Greg Kelly or not. Anyway, her partner is an ex-Marine. His name is Greg Kelly. And he's one of these kind of these TV personalities, but they do actually do news stories. They had the New York City school commissioner on, and they've had politicians, and they had a priest on talking about the Catholic sex scandal. But she used to be on the Real News program. That's Rosanna Moscato. But look at sort of the fluff that's going on here. I mean, they're analyzing Facebook. That makes sense. Here's some person with a Giants license plate, or here's the Daily's first anniversary. Here's the Groundhog Story again. Here's American Idol. Here's some investigation stuff. Hoboken parking ticket headaches. Here's actually a real case where it's criticizing a corporation. What's the story about? This is about John Corzine and his global fund. Anybody know what's going on with him? He's the former governor of New Jersey, who, by the way, almost got killed because he wasn't wearing a seatbelt and he got into an accident. He also was the former head of Goldman Sachs and a senator. Anybody know what's going on here? See? Supposedly his company misplaced billions of dollars. And he said, I'm literally quoting him, I don't know where it went. I get upset when I lose $5. Can't imagine what his investors were very happy. They probably, I'll tell you right now, if John Corzine, there was probably at least one investor who was like, John, I'm not normally a violent person, but you better just be warned. You better get my money back, dude. Seriously. And he's going to go to jail. We'll see. Former governor of New Jersey, we'll see. Okay? He's a bit of a doofus, too. Women higher risk in car crash. I love that. So there's some gender bias right there, some stereotypes. Here's talking about race and heart disease. That might be important. Illegal immigration. As long as fifth accuser takes to Facebook. I'm trying to find a story about murder. Let me try to find some murder stories. We want to see, let's want to go to Long Island and see what's going on Long Island. Frat party busted. Here we go, look at this. This is what goes on in your, or this is what passes for news in your neighborhood. Okay? Marina fire destroys 16 boats. Complaints against limousine company. And the caviar company. Sneaker thief stabbed guard. You know, when if somebody's stealing sneakers and I'm getting paid $10 an hour to be a security guard, see you later, dude. You got away with stealing some sneakers. I hate to say it, camera, I'm not getting stabbed for your stupid sneakers. I'll go get a job at McDonald's, probably pay more money and have more dignity. I mean, look, they don't make movies like Observe and Report and Paul Blart Mall Cop because people respect mall cops. Those are probably the least respected security officers in the world, aren't they? I mean, come on. And a lot of them are overweight. Not that it's a serious, but when you're going to be security guard, probably it's not a good thing. So, anyway. Not exactly that I'm the skinniest person in the world. Anyway. I own a student's pig adoption backfires. You want to watch that one? No. No. Here's a good one. Agent fires gun at rock throwers along border fence. Let's watch this one. This is a good sensational story here. It's got a little bit of violence, a little illegal immigration. Oh, it's not a video. That's stupid. Let's try to find a video. Let's go to New York City and see if we got videos there. But you see sort of the frivolousness of what's going on here. Oh, wait, these are actual... let me see if there's the videos. There's one on Madoff. Trump to endorse Romney. Here we go. This is one about crime. This is meant to frighten the public on some levels.
This is me. This is my
In the
room.
ubiquitous commercial.
This is my
Can't have
Civic HF.
internet without a commercial.
This is my big green button. This is me. Happy.
The 41 mile per gallon highway Civic HF, only from Honda.
What is going on here?
It's all the pictures.
I guess. I mean, that's goofy. I guess they're just showing pictures. But again, I mean, that's really even more absurd. Why are they? There's no audio. It's just pictures of some scrub that's trying to scare, just scare people. It's silly. You see the silliness of this? Here we go. Here's a good story. Here again, bomb threat at city school. Let's go to CNN. I'll show you what the national news looks like. I was going to do this anyway. I was hoping that Fox News would... I looked at the site last night and it had some videos. So, but let's look at CNN. I think this would be a good example. This is more the national news. So, all right, I'll give Fox News a pass. They're supposed to do local news. I don't mind you doing local news about robbers and things like that. But again, they don't put it in context, and you saw that one didn't even have audio. So I don't know what was going on there. I mean, the absurdity of that. And also the fact that nobody noticed that. It wasn't muted or anything, but let's look at this stuff here. So, did you see that? Those of you who know Soul Train Don Cornelius killed himself. So, did anybody say was he depressed or was? It's kind of odd for 70. I mean, it's actually not too unreal that a 75-year-old will commit suicide, but that's much more actually what younger people do. So.
I think they said he was going through like a divorce and he was accused of like...
I always tell people the dangers of romance. Romance is probably responsible for as many murders and suicide as you can imagine. I'm serious. Think about how many people murder each other over stuff, stalking on. Romance is good when it goes well, but when it goes bad, it goes horrible. And they say there's a thin line between love and hate. That's the proof of it to some extent. And poor Don, So anyway. So here are some of the stories. We'll try to find some videos here. You see here, one of the things that CNN loves to deal in is death. Anytime anybody's hurt or bleeding. And this is what I love.
This is no question, Brooke, the worst case.
All right, so this is what I love. The U.S. news media won't show like they got all upset when Janet Jackson had her top ripped off that somebody's boob was showing, but they'll show dead bodies with maggots and flies on their face right in front of 8 and 9-year-old kids. They'll show movies with all kinds of violence on TBS at 12 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. But if it's Sex in the City, oh my God, we can't have 7-year-olds watching that. We'd rather have them watch dead bodies and Bruce Willis shooting 25 people, innocent people, until he gets to the bad guy. You ever seen Die Hard? That guy causes so much collateral damage, and then he makes some smart-ass quip and they give him a medal. It's like, dude, you blew up 400 cars, you knocked down 5 buildings, you killed 200 civilians, just to save your wife? And also suggest to people that revenge is how you should operate. So here is a soccer riot in Egypt, which has had recent history. Ask yourself, what's the importance of this story other than the dead bodies?
Of football violence in Egyptian history. We understand that after these two teams finished a game in the town of Port Said, which is on the Suez Canal, right next to the Mediterranean, the fans of the Port Said club went onto the pitch and became involved in violent clashes with the fans of the other team called Al Ahly from Cairo. We understand from the health ministry at least 73 dead,
Missing,
almost 200
dead,
wounded. And of
death,
course, these are
dying,
just initial figures.
kidnapped.
We understand there are 90 ambulances on the scene at the.
You think humans were the worst people in the world?
The hospitals in Port Said are completely overwhelmed by this. This bloodshed.
Are soccer riots
this is indicative of the kind of security vacuum that has occurred here in Egypt since the revolution. Since the revolution, really, the police have never returned to the streets of Egyptian towns and cities in the kind of numbers they were on the streets before the revolution, and certainly there weren't enough at the Port Said Stadium to prevent this sort of horrific bloodshed that has many Egyptians wondering where this country is going. We understand Parliament is now going to be meeting in an emergency session to discuss
this is just a nonsensical story with absolutely no connection to anything that has any context.
Disturbing as I'm just seeing these pictures here of fires. I mean, this looks like something we would have seen many months ago, certainly not after a soccer football match. Can you explain just a little bit more context about these two teams?
Did anything blow up?
Rivals?
Can we get pictures of blood?
Why the degree of the violence?
Did any children die? Because we want to see that.
Well, the team that was one of the teams is the Ahly team, which is from Cairo, a wildly popular team. But there's a small group of fanatical fans called the Ultras who oftentimes go to these games with the specific intent of getting into fights with fans from the opposing team. Now what happened is that the Port Said beat the other team, the Ahly team, 3-1. And that may have played a part in sort of spark.
Alright, you guys get the idea. Alright, we'll watch one more story to show you sort of either the frivolous nature or the lack maybe of attention. You guys want to watch the amazing rise of Facebook, or you want to hear Romney talk about how he doesn't really care about poor people? Romney. Who wants to see Facebook? Romney? Alright. Man, Romney, you're in trouble, dude, because I don't think you guys are wanting to watch this because you like him. Not that there's anything wrong with that, you know. People have their own freedom.
This AT&T 4G
LTE
is fast.
Hey, did you hear my brain?
What?
So 4 seconds ago.
What?
Would that one say? 4G LTE with speeds up to 10 times faster than 3G. AT&T.
Hit escape.
Democrats and Republicans finally agree on something this morning. Mitt Romney really stepped in it. The GOP frontrunner stunned a lot of people yesterday. He wins Florida, but he kills the victory buzz by saying this to CNN's Soledad O'Brien.
I'm not concerned about the very poor. We have a safety net there. If it needs a repair, I'll fix it. I'm not concerned about the very rich. They're doing just fine. I'm concerned about the very part of America, the 90-95% of Americans who right now are struggling, and I'll continue to take that message across the nation.
So pundits on the left and on the right are taking Romney to task. The out-of-touch rich guy image. Apparently Romney has a history of making these unfortunate comments, is what I'm going to call them. Let's
This is
listen
the guy
to
who wants
some
to
of
be
them,
president.
and then we'll talk about it.
And he's ran before. He lost the game in 08.
I like being able to fire people who provide services to me.
I'll tell you what. $10,000? $10,000 bet?
I know what it's like to worry whether you're going to get fired. There were a couple of times I wondered whether I was going to get a pink slip.
I think I should also tell my story. I'm also unemployed.
Yeah, but you have $200 million in the bank, dude.
All right, so we know a lot of these comments are taken out of context.
He's
but
as rich as
unfortunately,
Bush,
especially
if
in
not
some of these,
richer.
there's always an economic undertone to them, which could be a big problem for him. He's now headed to Nevada, where there's a 12.6 unemployment rate. It's one of the highest in the nation. And, you know, these are gaps that he can't afford to have. The economy is the #1 issue, and 56% of Americans say that Romney is out of touch. The Tea Party, the conservative Tea
How do you
Party,
think
is
Obama
now
is
in
reacting to
Nevada.
this?
It wasn't the last time he was there. How has he recovered?
I'm not even on the campaign. This guy's going to campaign for me.
Well, he can do it two ways. He can sort of flood the zone, and he can go out and give as many interviews as possible, or he can start shying away from interviews with the news media to avoid these kinds of gaffes. The bad news for Mitt Romney is he's made a habit of this, as you just showed.
So
I mean, that reel of
it's
tape
his
is
personality.
basically an
It's not
attack ad for
slip of the tongue.
Democrats,
This is who
and that
he
they
is.
can run over and over again this fall if he's the nominee.
Again, though,
So
this
Mitt
is
Romney has
honest
two ways
about
of dealing
being
with
a
this, but I do think that in the end his advisors or the people around him need to talk to him about this, because this is a problem with this candidacy, and a long-standing one. You know, he's not the most articulate candidate we've seen on the campaign trail, and especially next to Barack Obama, who, no matter what you think of his politics, he's a very eloquent man. That's going to be a big difference this fall if he doesn't work out the kinks in his personality as a political candidate.
All right, now let me show you something that doesn't.
That was awful.
Or just say
If
that
you would hear something like that about Don.
billionaire my God. Wait. You're dating your adopted daughter. There's got to be something wrong with that, man. What are you, Woody Allen? My gosh. What's wrong with people? It's like the last days of Rome. But that's the impression you get when you watch the news, that people are out of control and the whole world is crazy. Maybe it's just that kook. Right? Why would you adopt your first of all, why would you adopt a 42-year-old to begin with? Secondarily, why would you adopt your girlfriend? And why would you announce that to the press? It's like telling people you lick peanut butter off the floor or something like that. Now, watch this story. These stories don't make it.
What it kind of signifies about U.S. policy towards Iran is Cyrus Safdari, independent analyst and blogger with IranAffairs.com. Now, Mr. Safdari, as Jihan just pointed out, this happened at a time when the U.S. was backing Iraq in a war against Iran, a country that many said, you know, was in an undeclared war against. Is this kind of an incident or an example of hypocrisy?
Because they were holding
well, it's one of the examples of many hypocrisies that have been going on, not just back then, but continue to this day.
This is not
at the time, the United States was backing Saddam's use of chemical weapons against Iran as well.
Now, let's switch over to sanctions, because this week we saw President Barack Obama sign into law the toughest sanctions against Iran, telling them they need to be an international player, they're not playing by the international rules. Now, when we look back at this incident of the Airbus, is this a double standard here?
Well, of course. I mean, his statements that Iran needs to play by the international rules, he doesn't specify what rules, because Iran is not in violation of any rules. Iran has the perfect right to enrich uranium in accordance with the terms of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And in fact, Iran's nuclear program started with the assistance of the United States. It's not an illegal or violative program.
And when you look back at the Airbus incident that occurred 22 years ago, do you think that there's still kind of the same attitude towards Iran? How has it evolved or changed?
Well, we still have this paternalistic attitude, but what's important is to realize that the Iranians are not silly or stupid. They're quite aware of the history of their country with respect to the United States. And so when the United States presumes to lecture Iranians about human rights, the Iranians naturally wonder, where is this coming from? Where was this concern about human rights when, for example, the United States was backing Saddam, or when they shot down the Iran Air 55, or all the other events that have happened between the two countries?
So there's awareness among Iranians, but but what about among Americans? I'll make a bet with you that this weekend we don't see this, anniversary make newscasts. I don't think that most Americans even know that this happened. How do you think that Iran is portrayed in the media here?
Like a monster.
Well, having lived in the United States both before and after the revolution, I can assure you that most Americans can barely find Iran on the map.
What do you think about this specific incident, the anniversary from 22 years ago? Is this something that still has relevance that people need to know about today?
People here have probably absolutely no idea that it ever even occurred.
And why is it important for them to know, or is it not? Is it irrelevant now?
Well, it's important to understand the context between the history of the two countries. Every day here we are bombarded by the latest Iran news. However, this news is never placed in any kind of context which would allow it to be understood. Instead, it's constant fear-mongering and scaremongering. And as a result, the Americans may know what's happened 20 minutes ago, but they don't remember what happened 2 years ago.
How does this differ from the way that Iran is covered in other countries, or the way that Iran's policies are perceived internationally, maybe outside of the United States? Is it a different take?
I think, unfortunately, the United States, its media and the Western media in general are so dominant in the world that it's very hard to get an independent voice out there. This is changing, however, and especially with the internet, and especially with the rise of media organizations in other countries.
I found this video.
I'm thinking positively about this. I think this is going to change eventually.
Well, you mentioned that some of the incidents that I brought up were just, a few of the examples of many hypocrisies over the year. What are some of those that people may not know about or may not be aware about that you believe have been brushed under the rug, but that are nonetheless very important?
Well, we can go back quite a ways to 1953 when the United States overthrew a democratic government in Iran and reinstalled basically a tyrant who had been kicked out of the country by the people. During the war with Saddam Hussein, the United States was backing Saddam, had provided Saddam with chemical weapons components and targeting intelligence. Anyone who goes on the internet right now can see videos of Rumsfeld, Donald Rumsfeld, the former Secretary of State, shaking hands with Saddam Hussein at a time when Saddam Hussein was gassing the Kurds, and the United States attempted to shift blame for that onto the Iranians. We can come forward now and talk about their nuclear program, which, as I said, started with the assistance of the United States, and suddenly now the United States is telling Iran that it has to give up its rights under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, rights that it enjoys as a sovereign state. However, the United States is closely allied with countries which do have nuclear weapons and have refused to sign the same treaty.
Now, I'm guessing you're talking about Israel there, as far as countries that are believed to have nuclear weapons that are not signed on, whereas Iran is, and there's no proof that they have nuclear weapons. Well,
not exclusively.
Okay.
Not exclusively Israel. Pakistan, we know they have nuclear weapons. India, the United States carved out an exception to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which would allow it to cooperate in nuclear fields with India, even though this is a blatant violation of the NPT.
That's the Nuclear Proliferation
Treaty. Nobody in Iran can be fooled by this.
Why, in your view, then, is Iran targeted?
Well, there are a number of reasons why. Basically, what we have here is a third world country that dared to rise up and overthrow a U.S.-backed dictatorship. Now, if Iran can do that, then so can the people in Saudi Arabia, so can the people in other countries in which the United States is closely allied with the ruling governments. And this presents a threat to not just the U.S. interests, but to basically many interests. Israel's regional interests are endangered by an independent and powerful Iran as well.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for all of your insights on Iran, past and present, and the U.S. policy towards the country. That was Cyrus Safdari, independent analyst and IranAffairs.com blogger. Well,
what's RT.com?
Let me look down to see if they write it. It is I believe it is a foreign news service, or basically an internet news service. What the hell is this? RTA America. Let me look up there. That's where with this computer. This is a piece of junk. Stop with the. Oh, I see what's going on. Sorry. Anyway, but here's the issue. They're sitting there saying, RT America broadcasts from studios in Washington, D.C. We report the other side of the story, not making any conclusions, but raising the unanswered questions. So they are partly in response to the fact that people feel that there is a monopoly in the news media. And I would say, remember they were sitting there talking that one guy was accusing the American news media of not paying attention to this in the American public, and that's absolutely true. But didn't I just show you that video? Don't you have access to that video? So part of I think that you can at least make the case for the pluralist theory, the idea that there's no way with the internet in particular that these big media companies can control all outlets and all information. And that's one of the beautiful parts of the internet. That's why the people who designed it and helped to develop it promote it so much. That look, I don't need, like, remember during the Iranian protest after the election, Twitter was being used to get information out because the government was censoring everything else. Same with a lot of other instances. The stuff with the Chinese earthquake, where the government wasn't doing what was right. That stuff got through Twitter. It got through official censorship channels. And if that's the case, then the internet can certainly challenge the dominance of these media companies. All right, well, we'll leave it there. Everybody have a great weekend. If you enjoy the Super Bowl, maybe you can catch the